If you understand this law, you'll never lack money again. Right now, as you read these words, a silent war is being waged inside your brain. It is a war between a tiny, almond-shaped structure deep in your emotional center and the advanced, logical gray matter sitting right behind your forehead. This war dictates every single dollar that enters your life, every investment you make, and every financial opportunity you inadvertently push away. Most people spend their entire lives believing that wealth is a game of math, luck, or grueling, exhausting hours. They chase strategies, hot stock tips, and side hustles, wondering why, despite all their effort, money always seems to slip through their fingers like sand. They live in a chronic, low-grade state of financial anxiety, a persistent whisper that says, "There is never going to be enough." But what if the barrier isn't the economy, your boss, or your bank account? What if the barrier is a biological loop you don't even know you're trapped in? There is a fundamental psychological law that governs the flow of money. If you do not understand this law, you can work 80 hours a week, win the lottery, or inherit a fortune, and your brain will still find a way to mechanically drag you back to scarcity. Your biology will literally blind you to the wealth sitting right in front of you. However, the moment you master this single law, the entire game shifts. You stop chasing money, and money begins to orient itself toward you. You move from the exhausting friction of survival into the effortless rhythm of sustainable abundance. If you are tired of the sleepless nights, the subtle tightening in your chest when the bills arrive, and the feeling that you are constantly running on a financial treadmill, pay close attention to what follows. We are about to look past the spreadsheets and step directly into the control room of your financial destiny. This is the exact blueprint to rewire your mind, unlock your cognitive power, and ensure that you never lack money again. True financial abundance starts with emotional self-regulation. Impulsive emotions lead to impulsive spending and poor long-term planning. Financial lack is often a biological state where stress and anxiety block the prefrontal cortex from spotting hidden economic opportunities. The ability to delay gratification is the single greatest psychological predictor of lifelong wealth accumulation. Deep empathy allows you to read the unspoken needs of the market, turning emotional intelligence directly into financial value. Breaking the cycle of never enough requires shifting from an anxious survival brain to an open, secure, and receptive mindset. True financial abundance does not begin in your bank account, nor does it originate within the lines of a complex corporate spreadsheet. It begins entirely with the subtle, often overlooked mechanics of emotional self-regulation. When we look at the trajectory of long-term wealth accumulation, we are not looking at a sequence of lucky breaks or raw intellectual calculations, but rather at a continuous chain of emotional choices. The fundamental flaw in how most people approach their finances is the belief that managing money is a purely logical exercise. We like to imagine ourselves as rational economic actors who weigh risks, calculate returns, and make optimal decisions to secure our futures. However, behavioral economics and neuroscience tell a starkly different story. Every financial decision you make is filtered through your emotional brain first. If your emotional foundation is fragile, unstable, or dictated by unconscious impulses, your financial structure will inevitably mirror that chaos. Impulsive emotions are the quiet killers of financial stability, acting as an invisible drain on your resource pool. When you lack the capacity to regulate your internal state, money ceases to be a tool for long-term freedom and instead becomes a coping mechanism for short-term emotional discomfort. Consider the cycle of impulsive spending, often referred to as retail therapy. This behavior has almost nothing to do with the physical object being purchased, and everything to do with a desperate internal attempt to alter an uncomfortable emotional state. Whether it is stress from a demanding job, a sudden spike in loneliness, or a deep-seated feeling of inadequacy when comparing oneself to peers, the untrained mind seeks an immediate escape. The brain craves a rapid spike of dopamine to soothe the emotional ache, and a quick purchase provides exactly that. This immediate gratification, however, comes at a devastating cost to long-term planning. When you are constantly using your capital to extinguish temporary emotional fires, you are systematically burning down the seed corn of your future wealth. Long-term planning requires a calm, stable, and reflective mental environment, a luxury that an emotionally dysregulated mind simply cannot afford. When you are trapped in a state of high emotional volatility, your psychological horizon shrinks dramatically. You lose the ability to look 5, 10, or 20 years into the distance because your brain is entirely consumed by the perceived emergency of the present moment. You become hyper-focused on immediate relief, which makes you incredibly vulnerable to get-rich-quick schemes, high-risk investments driven by FOMO, and lifestyle inflation that rises faster than your actual income. To break this cycle and establish a lifetime of security, you must develop the psychological maturity to sit with your emotions without immediately acting on them. Self-regulation is the practice of creating a conscious buffer between a sudden emotional trigger, be it fear, anxiety, or status-driven envy, and your financial behavior. It is the capacity to notice a wave of financial panic or an urge to spend extravagantly, acknowledge the feeling, and choose a response rooted in strategy rather than impulse. When you master this internal discipline, your relationship with money undergoes a radical transformation. You stop treating capital as an emotional sponge and start treating it as a strategic asset. You gain the clarity needed to identify genuine opportunities, the patience required to let compound interest work its magic, and the resilience to weather economic downturns without panicking. Wealth is the natural byproduct of an emotionally disciplined mind that refuses to sacrifice its long-term freedom for temporary comfort. To understand why so many people remain trapped in a continuous cycle of financial lack, we must examine the biological reality of how the brain processes stress and anxiety. The human brain is a marvel of evolutionary engineering, but it was designed for physical survival on a primitive savanna, not for navigating the complexities of a modern economic landscape. When you experience chronic worry about money, whether it is the looming threat of debt, the pressure of unpaid bills, or a persistent fear of losing your job, your brain does not recognize this as a modern financial dilemma. Instead, it interprets this psychological stress as an immediate, existential threat to your life. This triggers what neuroscientists refer to as an amygdala hijack. The amygdala, an ancient and powerful emotional alarm system deep within the brain, takes complete control of your nervous system, flooding your body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. In an instant, your biology prepares you to fight, flee, or freeze, shifting your entire cognitive orientation into a state of survival-driven defense. The profound tragedy of this biological response is that it completely paralyzes the very part of the brain you need most to escape financial hardship. The prefrontal cortex, located just behind your forehead, is the seat of high-level human intelligence. It is the biological center responsible for strategic planning, creative problem-solving, emotional regulation, and the ability to spot hidden opportunities in complex environments. Under normal conditions, a well-functioning prefrontal cortex allows you to look at a financial crisis and see a hidden angle, a new business model, or an innovative way to pivot your career. However, during an amygdala hijack, the brain systematically redirects energy and blood flow away from the prefrontal cortex and routes it toward the primitive survival centers. Your brain effectively blinds you to the bigger picture in order to keep you focused on immediate survival. When you are locked in this state of neurological distress, your cognitive horizon shrinks to almost nothing. You become utterly incapable of long-term economic forecasting or recognizing the subtle, lucrative trends unfolding around you. You look at a shifting market and see only danger, rather than the immense potential that change always brings. This creates a state of severe mental tunnel vision, where you make short-sighted, fear-based financial decisions that only reinforce your poverty. You might hoard cash out of panic when you should be investing, or you might freeze entirely, failing to take the calculated risks necessary to elevate your income. Furthermore, this biological state creates a powerful filter through which you view the world. You begin to look at every interaction, interview, or business prospect through the lens of desperation. This palpable anxiety is easily sensed by employers, clients, and partners, inadvertently driving away the very financial opportunities you desperately need. Financial flow is not merely an external circumstance. It is a neurological state of openness, clarity, and calm alertness. To transition into that flow, you must first learn to soothe the ancient alarms of the amygdala, signaling to your nervous system that you are safe, so that your prefrontal cortex can come back online and do what it does best: innovate, strategize, and build enduring wealth. The capacity to delay gratification stands as the single greatest psychological predictor of lifelong wealth accumulation, acting as a quiet engine that separates those who build enduring prosperity from those who merely cycle through temporary income. At its core, this ability represents a profound victory of the reflective mind over the reactive mind, a learned discipline where an individual intentionally tolerates a minor emotional discomfort in the present moment to secure a vastly superior outcome in the future. In our highly commercialized culture, we are bombarded with thousands of engineered messages every single day, designed to do the exact opposite: to hijack our impulses, erode our patience, and convince us that our worth is defined by immediate consumption. The modern economic landscape is weaponized against patience, offering instant access to consumer credit, rapid delivery, and frictionless spending, all of which cater to the ancient, primitive parts of our brain that demand comfort and status right now. When an individual lacks the emotional muscle to resist these pressures, their financial future is systematically traded away for fleeting moments of novelty and social validation. To build significant wealth, one must fundamentally reframe how they view money, moving past the superficial idea that currency is merely a tool for purchasing physical goods. True financial intelligence realizes that every dollar in your possession is actually a unit of storable energy and time. When you choose to save or invest a dollar, rather than spending it on a non-essential luxury, you are not depriving yourself. You are actively buying back your future freedom. Delayed gratification is the mathematical and emotional foundation of compound interest, a force that requires extended horizons of time to work its compounding miracles. A person who can master their impulses allows their capital to remain undisturbed, quietly multiplying in value, while the person ruled by immediacy constantly interrupts this compounding process to fund a lifestyle inflation that scales up as fast as their earnings. This psychological boundary is what transforms high earners into truly wealthy individuals, as history is filled with athletes, entertainers, and executives who earned millions of dollars, yet ended up bankrupt because their capacity to generate income vastly outpaced their emotional capacity to delay gratification. Furthermore, mastering this discipline grants you a massive competitive advantage in a world that has largely lost its ability to wait. Most people operate on incredibly short loops, looking for immediate payouts, instant career advancement, and immediate returns on investment. When you train yourself to operate on longer timelines, you can engage in projects, education, and investments that require deep cultivation before they bear fruit. You become willing to endure the unglamorous, quiet phases of building a business, mastering a complex skill, or funding an investment portfolio when there are no immediate accolades or visible rewards. This emotional resilience keeps you grounded while others abandon their strategies at the first sign of boredom or delayed feedback. By consciously practicing the power of the pause and choosing the enduring security of tomorrow over the cheap thrill of today, you shift from a frantic state of chasing money to a grounded position of structural stability, ensuring that your financial foundation grows broader, deeper, and more resilient with each passing year. The fourth pillar of this psychological law centers on a concept that many traditional economists completely overlook, yet it serves as the ultimate catalyst for real-world financial growth: the empathy dividend. There is a widespread, deeply cynical myth in our culture that to build immense wealth, one must be cold, calculating, and fundamentally ruthless. We are often fed images of the cutthroat tycoon who steps on others to reach the top. However, when we study sustainable, long-term wealth creation and the dynamics of highly successful enterprises, we discover a completely different reality. Money does not exist in a vacuum, nor is it generated by cold algorithms operating in isolation. Money is an emotional currency that flows exclusively through human relationships. Every single dollar you will ever earn, every investment that yields a return, and every business venture that succeeds relies entirely on a transaction between human beings. Therefore, your capacity to generate wealth is directly tied to your capacity to understand, connect with, and navigate the emotional inner worlds of the people around you. This is where deep empathy becomes a massive financial asset. Empathy is not a soft, passive emotion. It is a highly sophisticated cognitive skill that allows you to step outside of your own ego, your own biases, and your own immediate desires to accurately read the unspoken needs, frustrations, and aspirations of the marketplace. While the emotionally untrained person enters a business meeting or a negotiation thinking only about what they want to take from the table, the emotionally intelligent individual is hyper-focused on what the other person needs to experience. When you possess this level of social awareness, you can walk into a room and instantly tune into the emotional frequency of a client, a customer, or a partner. You can sense their anxieties, understand their pain points, and hear what they are not saying. This deep attunement translates directly into financial value, because the marketplace does not reward raw, abstract intelligence. It rewards value delivered with deep human resonance. When you can pinpoint the exact emotional problem a group of people is facing, whether it is a lack of security, a desire for convenience, or a need for connection, you can design solutions, products, and services that address that problem perfectly. Your marketing becomes magnetic because it uses the exact language of their internal thoughts. Your leadership becomes inspiring because your team feels genuinely seen and valued, unlocking higher levels of productivity and loyalty that money alone cannot buy. In a negotiation, an empathetic person doesn't create a hostile environment. They uncover creative win-win solutions that expand the financial pie for everyone involved. building high-trust networks that pay dividends for decades. Conversely, a lack of empathy is an incredibly expensive liability. A brilliant entrepreneur can build a revolutionary product, but if they lack the empathy to understand how their users actually feel when interacting with it, the product will fail. A highly skilled professional can be passed over for promotions and lucrative partnerships simply because they are emotionally tone-deaf, leaving a trail of friction and resentment in their wake. When you operate with deep empathy, you stop shouting into the void, trying to force people to give you their money. Instead, you position yourself as a trusted solution to their problems, turning your emotional intelligence into a powerful financial radar that aligns your financial goals with the deepest needs of humanity. Breaking the cycle of constant lack requires a profound internal shift, specifically rewiring the scarcity loop that dictates how your brain perceives and interacts with the world. For vast numbers of people, scarcity is not merely an external financial condition, but a deeply ingrained neurological habit. From an evolutionary perspective, our ancestors survived by assuming that resources were always limited, that danger was always lurking, and that they had to consume or hoard whatever they could find immediately. In the modern world, this survival instinct manifests as a chronic, low-grade background anxiety, a persistent mental filter that constantly whispers that there is never going to be enough time, enough security, or enough money. When you operate from this anxious survival brain, you view the entire economic landscape through a lens of threat and limitation. You become hyper-focused on what you stand to lose, rather than what you have the capacity to build, which paradoxically locks you into the exact financial stagnation you are trying to escape. To break free from this trap, you must consciously transition your nervous system from this defensive posture into an open, secure, and receptive mindset. When you are stuck in a scarcity loop, your psychological field of vision narrows so drastically that you become functionally blind to the wealth and opportunity sitting right in front of you. You might walk past a lucrative partnership, ignore a shifting market trend, or discount a brilliant business idea simply because your brain is too busy managing the emotional stress of survival to process new data. An anxious mind seeks familiarity and safety above all else, even if that familiarity means staying broke, because taking a calculated risk feels too much like stepping off a cliff. By contrast, shifting to an abundant, secure state of mind relaxes the nervous system, which immediately restores full operational capacity to your prefrontal cortex. This mental clarity changes your baseline perception. You begin to look at the exact same economic environment, and where you once saw only competition and dead ends, you now see gaps to fill, collaborations to forge, and value to create. Rewiring this loop requires you to actively challenge the automatic thoughts of insufficiency that dictate your daily behavior. It demands that you stop reacting to your bank account with a sense of panic and helplessness, and instead begin interacting with money from a position of personal agency and self-regulation. When you consciously train your mind to focus on leverage, utility, and the generation of value, rather than the raw fear of running out, you fundamentally alter your financial behavior. You move away from hoarding resources out of fear, which keeps your capital stagnant, and move toward allocating resources with strategic confidence. You stop viewing other successful people with envy and bitterness, emotions that alienate you from the very networks that could help you, and begin studying them with curiosity and respect. This psychological recalibration breaks the invisible ceiling on your potential, transforming your relationship with the economy from an exhausting defensive struggle into an active creative engagement where you are constantly attuned to the flow of resources.